the next scenario. Scenario 3 is going to be a little bit more complicated in the sense that what we're going to be doing is we're going to be introducing a small conflicting change to the data model. And we're going to resolve that using Git. So what we'll do here is in clone 1, we will add a score to the movies entity, right, and commit that and push that back to the remote. Clone 2 will pull that into their clone, right, and then make an update to that score property, right, to the description of that score. Right? And in parallel, in clone 1, the work is continuing and is also making an update to the score description. Right? Clone 1 pushes that back to the remote, commits that and pushes that back to the remote, while clone 2 is working with their updated score description in their clone over there. So when they commit that and want to do an update, right? So they will need to first pull from the remote into the clone, right, before they can push that back into the remote. And that's when there will be a conflict, because there's been an update over here to the score description and an update over there to the score description that we will need to resolve, right? So that's what we're doing. So let's switch over here. We are now looking at clone 1, and we're going to open up the model over here. And in the movies entity, we will add a new property, score, right? And that's going to be a numeric value. We will not yet add the description. We'll do that a little bit later. We'll save this, and we will push that to the remote. So adding score property to clone 1, right? Commit and push it back, meaning that in clone 2, we will now need to pull, right? Because there's been an update to the remote. Now that we have done that and we can open it up here in the clone 2, we will see that this score property is right there. And I am going to edit the description that I have over here and say, okay, this is a description added to clone 2. And I will apply that. I will save that to clone 2, right? Which means that in my Git interface here, adding the description, right? But I am not going to push that back yet. I'm going to commit that only to my clone 2, right? And then I'm going to switch to clone 1, and I'm going to grab the file and do something similar, right? I will add a description over here. This is a description added from clone 1, right? And I will save that as well. Now, what I have here now is I have a different change to the same field in clone 1 and in clone 2, right? And in clone 1, I'm going to say, well, added the real description to clone 1, and I'm not just going to commit it, I'm going to commit and push it. So that means that now in clone 1 and on the remote, the central remote, we now have this version here, right, from the clone 1 version with this particular description, right? So this description over here, right? Whereas in clone 2, we currently have a different description, right? So if I now go to clone 2, it's going to say, well, you still had a commit waiting, but before you can push that, you first have to pull. When you pull, there will be a conflict, right? Because there have been 2 edits to exactly the same property, right, in the Git repository. So I first need to resolve that. So it's going to show me, okay, what are the differences? Well, it's all about the same property, the score property. In this repo over here, in this clone over here, we have this particular description in clone 2. In this one over here, we have the description from clone 1. So which one do I want, right? This one was the latest one, right? And this one was the one that I prefer. So I'm going to check that, solve it. And now I will have to push this. And so when I now open this up in clone 2, you will see that the description is actually a description from clone 1, because that's the one that I kept when I did the conflict resolution. Right? If I go into clone 1, then it will say, well, you first need to pull, right? Because clone 2 has actually just pushed its changes into the remote. When I do so, I now have the latest version in clone 1. I open it up and I see that indeed the description added from clone 1 has, so to speak, won and is now the one that is valid for everyone. Right, so that's how that conflict resolution worked. And with that, we're going to wrap up this scenario 3 and looking forward to the next one.